All right, CS10s, welcome to this video about working with div tags, which are really all about controlling the layout of a website. Now, by layout, what I'm talking about is the way that the web page is presented, right? And if you think about it, what I have right now is a very plain website, which is perfectly fine. This was um, it's just designed to be informational, so nothing really fancy. But what you'll notice is it is just what I would call linear. So in other words, it just goes, everything is straight down in the line, right? We've got probably a heading, another kind of heading. We've got a numbered list. We have some images. They're used a table tag. You learned a little bit about that in an earlier lesson. But generally speaking, everything you'll notice is linear. There's nothing beside each other except in the situation where there is a table. And in fact, tables are how they used to lay out web pages back in the beginning of the web. And what you do is you basically create an invisible table across your whole web page. And if you wanted to have a title, you'd create one row that goes the entire length, and you use this for like a links bar, and then you'd create other things. And it's still doable, but it's not the way things work. Nowadays, what they use is something called divs to lay out. And I wanted to show you something by comparison. So I said this one is a um, vertical layout, right? Everything is just one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, as opposed to something like this. So this is a very modern website. What you'll notice here is there's an image. This image is here, and then beside that image there is some links bars. There's also a members login here. Here it looks like there's sort of one major area. Notice that this major area goes across the entire width of the screen. Then it goes into smaller groups that are a little bit less the whole width of the screen. You notice there's something here, then beside this and beside this. It does that again. Here's another one that's the full width of the screen. And here's a couple others. So this is all done using what are called divs, D-I-V. And a div is a type of container. And if you think about it, if I go to my W3 schools, and I'll fire up the starting of a website in a second. You might not have thought about this very much, but essentially when you use a standard tag like a paragraph tag or a heading tag, H1 or P, those are also kinds of containers. So is body. So body is the container that holds the entire contents of the website. In this particular case right now, we use an H1, which is going to hold, it just happens to be we only put one thing in, one line of text. Same thing in this paragraph tag, it just happens to be we only put in one line of text in it. But as you might have realized, or maybe not, your paragraph tags can also, and your H1 tags, can also hold images, and they can also hold other things. So they're containers that contain stuff, and a P tag is a particular type of container that's designed to hold text. So is H1, H2. They're designed to hold text, but it doesn't mean that you can't put other things in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create multiple levels of containers. And then once you create these containers, in our case we're going to call them divs, you can start to control how divs relate to each other. So rather than have div, or paragraph, you can now say I want this div and this div, which are each going to hold their own content, paragraphs and images and things like that. You tell them to go beside each other or do whatever you want. If you look at like another website like Google Docs, here is another example of a website that you use a lot. And if you think about it, there is all kinds of different areas or sections of this, and all these sections are represented with a div, and divs are highly used. So for example, if you go across the top, there's one area that goes all the way across the screen. That would be in one div. Then we have a second div with this that's kind of indicated by this gray line here, and everything inside that is in one div. Everything inside this bar here is a second div. If we go up, we notice that there's a picture beside the word CS30, beside the small menu files. So what would actually be the case is that we would have a div in that holds this picture. We have a second div for this one, and probably a third div for this one. Over here, we have a larger div again that goes here, and that does that. We also have this div here, and this is kind of interesting. We have a background that in my screen it kind of looks like just a slightly off-white, maybe a light gray. That's actually the background of the website. This is a div, and often the divs are called content divs. And so there's a content div that contains this, and you can adjust. I'm going to show you how to do this today. How to adjust the width of that content relative to the page. And what you probably intuitively know is if I reduce the size, what happens is the content div is going to adjust slightly based on the window size. But once I get to a certain width, the content itself will actually stop adjusting itself, and the only thing that'll get bigger is the size of the window, and that's because this particular content div has a minimum width and a maximum width. Now it happens to be that Google is really fancy, and their maximum width can be set by using this percent button, so you can actually change the CSS of the page live using these drop-down menus. So that eventually you can get to that. Now, divs and layouts are the hardest. First of all, it's one of the last big concepts we're going to do, and secondly, it's quite complicated. What I'm going to do today is sort of give you a crash course. I don't expect you to code along with this. I just want you to watch and kind of learn a little bit what's going on. The Khan Academy site will get into divs a little bit later, so you're going to see a lot of what we do again, and then at that point in time, a little bit slower, a little bit more focused, and things like that. Okay, so that's going to be the plan. What I'm going to use for that example is I'm going to use this How Does the Internet Work site. And again, like I did with the last couple videos, I'm going to just take little bits of content here and there to kind of show you how this might work. Okay, all right. So as always, I'm going to start in the replit, and let me just max my screen out now. Make this a little bit bigger, and I'm also going to, as always, start with my CSS. So I'm just going to go right from the beginning. And kind of walk you through the whole process one more time. So there I've got my basic stuff. I'll hit run just so it shows up on the other side. Now, first thing you need to be aware is that when it comes to working with HTML, everything is actually done in divs. So right now, this is actually bad style because it's a learning tool where it doesn't have this stuff in divs. So I'm going to start by creating a div, and very quickly I'm going to give these divs classes and things like that. But at the beginning, I'm just going to do that. And I think I'm going to see if I can up my font a little bit on this page. How is that going to show up for you? Hopefully that's good enough. Actually, I don't think I want to up the font yet. And maybe I'll try to see if I just Control plus if it just does that part of the window. We'll see. We'll give that a go. Okay. Now, so what I'm going to do though is I'm going to, oops, I missed my V on div. Open div, close div. So, and I'm going to tab that in, just make it a little bit easier to see that's in this one div. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just throwing some basic div styles up. Now, very quickly, I'm going to change those div styles to work a little bit differently. I think I'm going to make my P size a little bit smaller, just so once I do paste in some content, it's going to be a little bit quicker. In fact, actually, why don't I do that right away? I'll go to this other site here and paste in a little bit of content. So I'm going to do kind of like what I did last time. I'm going to pause the video. We're just going to get a little bit of content in with some paragraph tags in, just so it's kind of got a little bit more to play around with. So I'll pause that right now and do that. All right. So what I've done is I've added an image at the top. I have changed the content a little bit, created my paragraphs, and right now you'll notice again that everything is inside this div, including how the internet works. Now, what I'm going to do at first is I'm going to give this div just some properties so you can see everything and how they work, and then I'm going to very deliberately play around with what divs and have a couple different kinds of divs, because I'm going to want this as maybe a title bar and a few other things. I'm also going to make my image a little bit small, actually quite a bit smaller, because I definitely don't want it to be that big. So I'm going to set that equal to 100 pixels, which is probably really small, but that'll get my point across a little bit later on once I'm ready to show a little bit more. I was also trying to play around with this little link here, which is supposedly allows it to open this whole thing in a new tab, a bigger window. But when I did that, it wasn't working. So I'll try to run that in the background, see if that works. It'll be a little easier to see what's going on once we have a full web page. Okay, so div styles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a style for all divs for starters. But like I said, I'm going to more than likely not put this for all divs a little bit later on, because I want to kind of have my divs to be very customized. I want to have a title bar at the top that has one bit of feature functionality. I want to have a few other things as well. But I do want to throw some up that are relatively straightforward. So I'm going to do a border. Actually, let's start with the background color. Let's pick a background color. Oh, one of the really interesting things you might want to use for background color is a site called color.adobe.com. This is a pretty cool site where you can play around a little bit on your own. I'm sure there's a little online tutorial. Maybe I'll link it eventually. What I'd like to do with this though is to explore themes. You can actually extract themes out of images and stuff like that. It's a really cool site. I'll have to show you guys sometime. next time we can do more things. But let's say, for example, I want to do something with, I don't know, maybe we want to talk about Rory, so I can type in the term lion, and what it does, it just gives a whole bunch of color schemes that have been pre-flagged with lines. Some of them are based on imagery and things like that. So I kind of like this one. So what I'm going to click on that one. And it gives me the hexadecimal colors. So let's say I wanted this color as the background, and then maybe I'm going to have like this color as the text. We'll kind of do a little reverse. So I can just copy it. This uses the hexadecimal number version as opposed to the color code. But you'll see in a minute that it works the same. So there's a background color. I'll paste that in. And I need to now change my font colors, of course. So I'll go and grab the light color, copy that, and put that into my two text colors. So they're both the same. So that way we got a nice color scheme that somebody else has previously done. So this background color, though, well, let's run it right now and show what it does. It does everything right now because, of course, everything is in one div. So actually, what I want to do is I want to show you what might happen if I create two separate divs, because I do want to do that eventually. Eventually, I want this top to be in a sorry, that one should be a slash div. Did I do the slash div? I did. Yeah. And this is a new div. Okay, and run it again. You'll see that there's now a break. There's a break in there. A break in between those, not the natural margins that are in between things. We talked a little bit about that before. Now, one of the things you'll notice right away is that the text is a little bit tight to the thing. So this might be something where we go right away. And if you remember this from my other video, we can add some padding. Let's say we do 10px and run it again. Now we'll have a little bit of padding in between. Oh, you'll also notice it actually killed that border as well. I actually wasn't necessarily expecting to do that. That's okay. We're going to deal with that in just a minute, because next thing we're going to do is do borders. And all of these border code I can find on CSS. So if I go to borders here, as a reminder, you can set different kinds of border settings here. There's different border styles. There's all kinds of different ways you can try it. See if I go to this, try it yourself. And there's actually ways you can do the thickness as well, which isn't quite in here. Where we go. So border styles. There's a few different kinds of border that you can border type code you can work with. I like using a slightly different one than here, so I'm going to show it to you here in a separate line of code where it looks like this. It's sort of all in one, and you can find this online in a couple places. So border. A width of the border, the style of border is going to be solid or dotted, and then of course the color of the border. So if I run that, you'll see that. So it's creating a 3-pixel solid border around. Right now that border color is black. If I wanted to, of course, use something for my color wheel, maybe I want to do that one. This is probably going to look a little bit ugly, but I want to do something that'll stand out for you. So I'll throw that in there, and we run it, and now you can see right away. Oops, unless I broke it. Oh, maybe that has to be a color code. Yeah, okay. I'll go back. Maybe that does not accept. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Just took a while to get in there. Okay. All right. So there's some styles that work with divs. Now, the other thing, though, I want to talk about is border radius. I don't think I mentioned this the other day. So these are all, again, really quick really quick things, and so I can go T and PX and see what that looks like, and run that. And what you can start to do is a soften corner, which makes it look a little bit better. Another soft thing is it's called a box dash shadow that is used. So there was a text shadow the other day. This is more used for divs, and so what it does is it's going to ask for two numbers, or it could use two numbers, like how far down and how far to the right do you want this shadow to be. And of course, the standard default colors are going to be as well. I believe it's a gray color. So again, I'm just showing you some quick things here. I'm not going to run through all the details, but that doesn't really look super good because of the margins on there. And in fact, it's black is a little bit ugly, so I'm definitely going to make that quite a bit smaller here. Let's go like 3 and maybe a 4 or something like that. Run that again, and that'll soften the colors. And you don't really see that until you get near the bottom of these. So you'll see a little bit more as we get going through. There's all kinds of these different things. But here's where things start to get interesting. I want to now also start to control the width, okay? The width of this thing. And so what's interesting about width is you can control the width of divs, and the width will always the percent or the number, the amount you give is always going to be relative to its container. So right now, divs are in the body. So right now the default is 100% of the width of the body, but it's actually not quite. If you look over here, you'll notice there's a little bit of blue still sticking out of there. That blue is now terrible. I definitely gotta get a new color part of my my line scheme for that in a second. So let's I'll fix that in just a minute. But what I want to do is I want to start giving these some different things. So I'm going to give this one an ID. ID equals, and I'm going to call this one header, which is a common name for that type of div. And then I'm going to give this one a ID equals main content, which is again is a common name for that main div. So div main content. Now, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to change this to be ID. Now let's see if I remember this from last time. I believe ID is, I remember I said I always get this wrong. Main content, and we run. And what you'll see is suddenly that this particular one is the only one that has a div. Is this working over here? No, dang. Sorry, this is the only one where the div applies, because of course this is the wrong one. So we'll deal with that in just a second. But now I want to add the common thing where you say width, and I'm going to say 60%. Now you can do widths, and you can even do some height to a certain extent, but height usually you want it to be dynamic depending on the screen size, right? Because you don't know if someone's got a small screen and they're going to narrow it, and then you want the content to get bigger. So you usually don't deal with heights coded here, even though it's possible to do. But when I run this, what you'll see is that this particular div is now 60% of the width of the screen. And it doesn't matter how big I make this, it's still always going to be 60%. Okay, so the second thing we want to do is talk about some of the alignment, because right now usually you want these things in the middle of the screen, right? So first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with I'm going to pause. I'm going to play around with the color scheme. I'm going to give my header a slightly different set of code. A lot of it's going to be the same, but I'm going to have it go all the way across. I'm going to play around with the pictures as well. So bear with me a minute, and well, you won't know because I'm pausing, and I'm going to come right back. All right, so I have changed the header. I've created a header div class with some code. So I used the same background color and same padding. I've made it have a width of 100% versus my main content, which is 60% width. You can see this here in a second. And then I've also done a margin bottom of 10. So that is what brings the other one to have start down a little bit lower. Now, just so you know, one of the things that it wasn't obvious in the other things is that the borders go on the outside of the div. So if you have thick borders, it looks like it crosses over, and that's why the borders, the margin of the two divs look like they tend to kind of merge there the other time. The other thing is what else did I do? Oh yeah, so I just got rid of some of the other things to clean up the image of that top, and quite often those top ones are pretty clean. If you look at, oh, I don't have it up anymore, but one of the ones that might be a real clean thing. So now, if you notice, if I make this bigger or smaller, that the window gets bigger or smaller, which is looking pretty good. You'll also notice that how the internet works is always still centered. That's just because that's what the H1 tag is. There's nothing to do with that. You'll also notice that the image and how the internet works is on two separate lines. That might not be obvious, but it's because, again, H1 is its own container, so by default, each container goes on naturally onto the other onto the next line, and that's something that can get changed over time. And in fact, we're going to show it to you. Probably not in this video, but maybe we'll see how it goes. Okay, the next thing I want to show you, maybe, yeah, the next really important thing is I want to make this centered, right? Because it looks kind of silly to be over on the side edge. And the other thing is this this width of 60. I don't like anymore, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it say something like 85%. That color is terrible, so now I should go with a different background color for the whole thing. Let's go with that one for background color. So I'm going to go give that one the background color of my whole body. There it is, because that looks terrible. And we'll run that. And now my color scheme should at least start to look a little better. I mean, it doesn't look great, to be honest with you, with the borders and things like that, particularly with the shadow, but it's starting to, you can start to see some of the styles. So here's how you make something a center. Now this works with divs when there's only one div attached to this. So right now we only have one main content div that is on the left side. It's below the other div, because every time you create a new container, by default it goes below. So the second div is sitting by its own. What you can do is you can do margin again. And so what you end up doing is margin left, but then you say auto as an automatic. And if you do the same thing for right auto, then it will center your div. And so this starts to look a lot more like a real web page, right? It's dynamic, it adjusts. So that's kind of cool. Second thing I want to do is I want to go up to this particular div in here and adjust this a little bit. What I'd like to see is this image. First of all, I'm going to make it quite a bit bigger, but I want to make it bigger so that it fits beside how internet works. And then I think I also want to put a little bit of the information it had in there from here, because it gave a little bit of copyright information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and I don't think it'll actually let me copy the copyright symbol. That's actually an interesting question, what happens there. So I'm going to go Control C. I'm going to go back to Replit. I'm going to go to that, find that div. That's my title div. And I'm going to add this in here. If I just put in a p tag, it might be still quite big. So I'm going to, well, yeah, sure, I'll leave it as a p tag. There we go. We'll paste in that, and we'll see what it looks like with those copyright symbols. Oh, it did work. Okay, cool. So again, now this does this. Now that's not bad, but again, ooh, man, this is terrible. This is centering over here. I wanted this to kind of be over here. I want this image to be nice and big. So what we're going to do is we're going to create divs within divs. So now we're going to start to get a little bit complicated. I'm going to start by not putting any borders on, and you'll see how things work or what's happening once I put a border on afterwards. So I'm going to create a new div inside this header div. Okay, so this is like so this is going to start to get tricky. Well, this is why, right? Because you have divs inside divs inside divs inside divs. So I'm going to create a div just for the image. Why? Because that is going to allow me to then make these divs go beside each other. Now, by default, that won't happen. By the way, we're going to have to play around with that a little bit. So I need to close the div for the image, and then I need to close the div for the text, which happens to be the title. So now, if I tab this, what it actually looks like is here's my div here. I should try to keep my good tab is working, and then this is here. This content is inside that div. This content is back. Oh, do I have an extra close? Open header. Open that div. Close that div. Open that div. Close that div. That one we have an extra on there. Okay. Close the header div. Yeah. Oh no, that's. We need to close that header div. Okay. Sorry, before I do anything else, let me run that. Okay, cool. Now, you'll notice that right now they're still beside each other. We're going to deal with that in just a second. Oops, I must have broken my H1 tag. How did I break my H1 tag? Oh, there we go. I didn't put a close bracket on there. Let's try that again. Run. There we go. Okay, so what's happening? Well, I have one div here, which isn't doing anything we want. I want it to be beside it. We're going to fix that in just a second. Then I have a second div here. Now, you can't really see it unless I just do something really, really quick. I'm going to put see if I can just kind of do a little cheater one here. Equals white. I'm not sure if this is going to get cascaded over top by. Oh, this one's going to probably. It's probably going to override that. Oh, okay, good. So you can see that it's there. Okay, so that way that you can at least tell those divs are there. And again, I can do whatever I want afterwards. But I want these two divs to be beside each other. Now this is where we add something called the display, and I'll be back in a moment to show you how that works. All right, the last thing I want to do in this lesson is to show you how to do those things side by side each other. So I took a little pause there to make sure I got this code right, and it's a relatively simple code to use. It's not necessarily easy to understand how it's working. So certainly don't expect to be a full grasp of this together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two divs that are inside my header div and turn them into a class, and that class I'm going to give the properties that allows them to go beside. And what that property is called is display. So how are these blocks displayed? And in fact, the word block I'm using deliberately because there's a piece of code called inline block that we're going to use. Inline meaning take these two blocks and have them go in line as long as there's space beside each other to make that work. So I need that class. So I'll start up here in my styles. I'm going to say class, which remember is the dot. And so I'm going to just call this, I'm going to call it title bar because that's kind of what this is. So I've already got the header used, so I'm going to call this one title bar. Copy that for use in just a second. And now I want to put this in the two divs, the one that's holding the image and the one that's holding the how the internet works. You need to do it in both because these are the two that are going to go beside each other. So class equals title bar. Grab that and repeat that for the other one. So both of them need the same setting for this to be effective. Now, obviously that doesn't change anything. I just want to make sure I didn't break it. Okay, good. So here is the code. It's called display, and it's inline dash block. If you're interested in learning more about displays, this is the most complicated thing. There's something called display and position. Those are the two most complicated things that allow you to adjust and play around with things. In fact, what you're going to see in a minute is that it doesn't line up exactly right. Ideally, and that's because of well, it's easier for me to just show you. So as soon as I hit that, you'll notice this thing kind of works. Now, this picture is a little bit hard to see. So what I thought I would do is I would give this the same background color as my whole body, and so that will look a little better. So my first instinct was I'll just copy background color into title bar and run that, and it works. But what you'll notice is that but I have this other background instead. So what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to take that background color, and that's the color I'm going to make the header. So I've decided now that I played around with my style a little bit that I want to have all my title and everything to look like it goes across the whole screen. So I'm not going to give it a separate background color, just a stylistic choice. The other thing you might notice is a little bit interesting is the positioning of this image. By default, well, this isn't really the best image, right? It's too long and it's not very tall. It'd be nice if this was an image that was kind of tall enough to sort of match the size of this. Now I can skew this by putting in a height, but then that's going to make my image look really, really weird. So I'm going to leave it this, but the one thing I want to point out is notice where the things are ending, right? The paragraph text creates a little bit of extra space at the end. This doesn't, so it does do something a little bit weird, and this would be something where you might have to go into something called position and say for this particular div set its relative position, meaning if it naturally goes here, we want to bump it up a little bit so that it's more centered. There is also ways you can do vertical alignment on here. Actually, this is an experiment. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I think that's the setting of the header because that's this content. If I go v-align and say, let's see, v-align center. I have no idea if that's a legit code. Oh, it doesn't like center. V-align top. No, maybe it does. Let's run. And nope, so that did absolutely nothing. So okay, I'll have to remember what that looks like a little later on. I'll look that up. You can make things kind of line up in center on top. So let's just move this background. Actually, instead of moving it, I'll leave it there, but I will make my header the same background. We will run it again, and now we've got a pretty sharp looking website. Certainly a lot better than what we started. This again, the way we set this up is that this is centered in its div. Notice, however, though, that this div does not go all the way across the screen. It doesn't center in across the whole screen. It only centers within its width, and the size of a div naturally is its content size. So this text is the natural end of that particular div. So it's not the whole thing. Now again, that's something you can play around with. So there is your crash course in working with divs. So, look at that. Notice when I get too small, it doesn't have enough space for it, so it just naturally wraps. That's what inline block does. So if it has enough space, like this does, it's going to put them beside each other. If it doesn't, it's going to move it down. And so now you're really getting into some really interesting stuff. And so you can have 3 different divs. Like, it's quite often to have like some sort of highlights. Say you got a store and you want to put your things on sale at the top. You can have those across. Really, there's a whole bunch of different combinations of divs, and there's a lot more to it than I've shown you. But it's some pretty cool stuff. So that was a long video. It's almost a half hour now. So again, you're going to learn about this in Khan Academy as well. You're welcome to start experimenting with it now or later. But again, don't feel like you had to have grasped absolutely everything in here. But at least you have some access. All right. Bye bye.